Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast, the personal development podcast for folks who want more fulfillment, connection, purpose, and joy in life. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, a no-nonsense coach, a seasoned entrepreneur, photographer, rescue dog mum, and happy life enthusiast. Each week on the podcast, I share tools, tips, and strategies, amazing guest interviews, and uplifting conversations that will help you improve all areas of your life. Let's dive in. Hi, folks. Welcome to season 3, episode 8 of the podcast. Today, my guest is April Pride, and we are talking about the benefits of microdosing for mental health and well-being. Before we jump in, I'm going to share a short disclaimer. So this episode makes reference to psilocybin, and the content shared in this episode is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical conditions, nor is it to be interpreted as medical advice. The first port of call for any mental or physical symptoms or issues should always be your doctor. This podcast episode is not promoting or condoning illegal substance use, and you are advised to check the legal status of psychedelics in your country of residence before making an informed decision as to if or how you choose to use them. I'm going to tell you a bit about my guest. Now we have the formal bit over. April Pride is a Seattle-based serial creative entrepreneur whose work has been featured in Forbes, Vice, and The Guardian. She's developed brands and products for 20 years. In 2015, April turned her visionary focus to cannabis with the launch of Vanderpop, a cannabis lifestyle brand acquired by the world's largest cannabis company 3 years after launch. As the CEO and founder of SetSet, April created the world's first clinician-approved, woman-focused platform for safe, accessible psychedelic integration. And she is the host of The High Guide, a podcast all about changing your life with cannabis and psychedelics. Welcome to the podcast, April.
Hi, thank you so much. I already have a correction in my bio. The High Guide was my last podcast that we've bundled everything under SetSet, which is my current platform. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Amazing. But for anybody who wants to listen, it's on your SetSet website, which we'll share in the notes at the end. Yeah. And I've listened to a couple of the episodes and it's absolutely brilliant. It's so informative. And I think I just want to say before we jump in, it's great to be speaking to an expert, authoritative female voice in the space of psychedelics. We know there are so many male voices in this space, so I'm really thrilled to have you here and to be having this conversation with you, April. It's so important, and I'm thrilled we found each other to do this.
Thank you.
Can you kick us off by sharing exactly what microdosing is for anybody listening who's completely new to this?
Sure. When talking about microdosing of any substance, it means you're taking a sub-perceptual amount of that particular medicine. And, it's interesting. I always say it's 1/20th of a standard dose, but I was doing research for this show and it came up to 5 to 10% of a standard dose. And I think it's somewhere between 10 and 20%. So those details are not critical because it, again, matters which medicine we're talking about. And microdosing psilocybin, which is really where we're going to focus today, is 300 milligrams or 0.3 grams of psilocybin by dry weight. That's right now how it's all measured. But that actually doesn't have anything to do with how much active ingredient it is. It's just where we are with things. So I find that, I'm a 48-year-old woman. I'm 5'10". I weigh, 140 pounds, and 150 is my max. If I have 200 milligrams, I'm aware that I took a microdose that day. It's not the end of the world. I can conduct a meeting. I can be on a podcast, but that's not what a microdose is. And I often hear from women, because those are the people that I speak to, tried it, I didn't feel anything, so I stopped. But that means you're doing it right? You're not supposed to feel anything. So a microdose is, again, sub-perceptual. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that with my own microdosing experience. Sometimes I'll take it and I can function normally. Other times I'll take it and I'm thinking, ooh, mm, yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to drive the car anywhere just now. And it's like I say, it's fine unless you've got something important going on. So I tend to try
Right.
and plan if I'm microdosing, I'll do it on a day where there isn't anything crucial happening in there, just in case.
Yeah. And for some people, it can keep them awake. It can be energizing. So it's advised to take it in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I agree with that. I tend to take it in the morning. And I know other people who microdose it's better in the morning because it can be a bit of a stimulant.
Mhm.
Can you share? So we're talking about microdosing for mental health issues, potentially things like anxiety, depression. There's a lot of
Mhm.
scientific evidence now pointing to the value of psilocybin for treating that, both in macrodoses and microdoses. Obviously, we're on the microdose track today. But
Yeah.
can you share how and why it helps with things like anxiety and depression and what it's doing to our brains that's really helping us see those results?
Yeah, I love I really appreciate how wherever I learned this, but anxiety comes from future tripping, thinking about the future and not really being able to see what's going to happen and having fear around that. And depression is looking backwards and not being able to change things. Both of those emotions I am familiar with for sure. And so what's happening in our brain is we have our motherboard. It's called the default mode network. And it's where we keep all the stories that we tell ourselves, that we've been told about ourselves or about people like us. And that storytelling is super powerful. It it informs our decisions, even when we're not using that information with any data to back it up, right? And we may be unaware. It's subperceptual. It's not subperceptual, but it's subconscious, you know? And so what happens when we take psilocybin quiets that part of our brain at any dose and allows us to see things and to see things differently and to tell ourselves different stories. Psilocybin is also a serotonin agonist. So it increases our serotonin levels, right? And people take SSRIs. Women like my age, we're losing the amount of serotonin that is released because we have a decrease in estrogen. So at a certain age or a certain time of the month, right, when you microdose, you increase your serotonin levels. So that's helpful. And think of your brain like this. For our entire lives, we have been making decisions. And when we make those decisions, we create these grooves, these neural pathways in our brain. And when we take a psychedelic, it's like new snow falling into those grooves. And so when we have a starting point and I'm going to use a word that I think we all know when you're triggered, whether, good or bad, but you have a way that you execute the next move. And it's based on conditioning. You just you go where the groove is. So when you fill in those grooves, you can start to make different decisions. And that includes how you talk to yourself, how you see situations. And that's how you can start to shift your emotions around anxiety and depression. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I've found it so useful. I would say psilocybin and plant medicines that I have used collectively, I've been using them for the past 2 years. They've made me a better human, is how I would describe it. I think it's given me that level of self-awareness to be able to, I can catch myself before I say something I shouldn't if I'm triggered. Because
Yeah.
I think you can do lots and lots of inner work and you can reduce the triggers, but they never really, there's always something that's a little bit potentially
Mm-hmm.
can push a button.
Yeah.
And I think it's being able to extend that time between stimuli and response so you
Mm-hmm.
can make a choice in that moment. And that's one thing I found it's really done for me is it's made me a better person. It's made me more accepting. It's so powerful. I've seen for other people, it's been a clear mood booster.
Mhm.
I think of more practical people that I know that aren't quite so into the spiritual side of it, who
Mhm.
will just say, I just feel better.
Yeah.
And I've seen people in my life who've been microdosing. I've seen them evolve and really
Mhm.
step up for themselves. It's
Mhm.
it was super, super powerful.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the pause. It brings a pause into your day and into your interactions with people. It's everything, right? Because we just react. And when you can take just 3 seconds to think about how you're going to react and you do it differently,
Yeah.
people treat you differently, right? Your outlook on how the world perceives you and is being kind to you or not also
Yeah.
changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I've noticed it. I think the best example I can give you is with my husband. Invariably, there are, not necessarily arguments, but discussions that happen. And I think sometimes, especially if it's a bit triggering, it can be really easy to throw in some sort of remark about something. And I've just found myself going,
Mm.
shut up. I know you want to say it, but is it going to, in the long run, move things forwards? It's not. It's going to increase the time of the argument, and it's
Mm.
going to make the hurt even worse. So I think it's that quieting down, and it's incredibly powerful. I have to say though, I know we're talking about using it for kind of alleviating anxiety and depression. I had the most challenging period of self-growth when I microdosed. I had a period of microdosing
Mm.
for about 8 weeks last year.
Mhm.
It was brutal. So much stuff came up for me. I'm thinking
Wow.
I'm supposed to be feeling better. And actually, afterwards, it was a huge self-development jump. But loads of, I had situations with my photography work where I had to get a lawyer involved because somebody was really trying to take advantage. And it pushed me into really stepping up for myself. And
Interesting. So there
it
were
was,
external situations that happened to
yeah,
coincide
yeah,
when you were microdosing.
yeah,
And you think that if you hadn't been microdosing during that time,
yeah,
you would have acted differently, you would have responded differently, and the outcome perhaps it
yeah,
ended up being what was the best case scenario, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I agree with
Amazing.
you. I
Wow.
could pull a bit of woo woo in to say, did the mushrooms attract in the situation? But that's probably a different podcast conversation. But it's
Oh
I
no, we
have
could go there.
fine. I don't think it was coincidental. I found with we're going to go off
Mm.
tangent here. I found with plant medicine, with doing prepping for macro doses and also the microdoses, the medicine almost starts to work before you take it because it starts to bring. I think it brings situations into your awareness where there's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I think I, okay. I think that I live in the United States and you can look at
Mhm.
the numbers. We are a society obsessed with drugs, right? We just are. And we're not well
Yeah.
at all. And we put a lot of power in them. And I think that that starts to happen when you make the choice to microdose and
Mhm.
we can take our own agency and turn it over to the
Mhm.
medicine
Yep.
when I don't know. I mean, I believe in divine timing, but I don't think that has anything to do with the medicine,
Mhm.
although the medicine perhaps comes to, okay, so I love hearing this from people. They've gone to the jungles of Peru and they've tried ayahuasca. They've had large mushroom trips. But they were like, I just wasn't called to the mushrooms for microdosing. And then I was. And that's the divine timing. It's when you choose, right?
Yeah.
So yes, there is something there, but I think you were well prepped to make that choice and know it was the right time. And
Yeah.
intuitively you were already, yeah,
Yeah.
feeling that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's something there.
Oh, I agree with you entirely. And I think coming back to the more scientific point of it, with using the medicine to fill in new information into old worn neural pathways, it I found the confidence from somewhere to do something differently, even though it was absolutely terrifying.
Mm. Do you want to talk more about that?
So yeah, so I did a photography job for somebody, and we had agreed terms, and it was for a quite a big agency, and I'm a one person. And the copyright law in South Africa is not the same as in the States. So there is something in copyright law here that whoever pays for the work owns it,
Mm-hmm.
in theory. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
broad. However, we had discussed contractual things. But what they tried to do when I said to them, here's what you can have, but you're going to be paying extra for the other things that you want, they tried
Mm-hmm.
to pull this copyright law stunt on me.
Mm-hmm.
And something that's very triggering for me is things like legal letters. I don't like stuff like that. I find
Of
it's
course
very frightening for me. So I'm like, oh my God. So there was a part of me that thought I can just make this go away by giving them exactly what they want.
they want. Yeah, right.
And then I thought, you know what? I'm actually not going to be bullied into this. I know what we agreed because I've been down this road before. I've got terms in place here. So actually, I'm not going to be bulldozed into this. Um, and long story short, I amazingly managed to find an intellectual property lawyer who took the consultation on, I think they took it on risk. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't pay anything for it. This guy wrote me a great big long email to copy and paste to them, and I sent it and kind of ducked for cover. And they came back and they said, "Oh, well, we'll pay. We'll offer to pay you a settlement for the rest of the stuff."
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great. I mean, so okay, this is where the intuition comes in. You like found the right lawyer, like
Mm-hmm.
you were watching the signs and knowing to ask the right people. And like that's where the microdosing
Yeah.
helps. It's really tapping into your intuition and trusting it, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to be like, I think this is the right thing. It's another thing to be like, this is the right thing. I'm going to do something about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. It just gave me that little bit, and I think in microdosing, macrodosing, what's happened for me, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on it,
Mhm.
is it's given me a greater acceptance of myself as I am. And I think when we are more accepting of ourselves, we're more confident because you're not questioning things, you're not waiting for external validation from people. And I think that confidence allows you to show up differently. And of course, when you show up differently, you get different new, better outcomes. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what transformation you've experienced from microdosing and
No, I feel like I'm
macrodosing.
always in process. The transformation, I'm still in my cocoon. Um, the pause that you mentioned is big for me, not being reactive. I
Mm-hmm.
have an ADHD diagnosis. So taking time throughout the day and really thinking about what I'm going to be doing and coming at my tasks with intention and ease, having an ease about my day. And I will tell
Mm-hmm.
you, it's interesting. I actually take my microdose in the afternoon when somebody might have a cup of coffee to kind of get through those last emails and go into dinner and all of that. That's when I take my microdose.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very aware of what my attitude is that day already, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I notice a huge shift in my optimism.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just a necessary thing in my life. I need it, right? Like I don't always need it every day, but the fact that I have something that is from nature that I
Mm-hmm.
can call on, and it's so immediate. It's like you get in the car with the kids and you're like, oh, everything's going to be okay, right? Just,
Yeah.
yeah. So, because they need to feel that your energy is one of safety and, bright outlook and that you are okay. I was having a conversation with a friend last night and she's a part of this mom's group post divorce. And it's like, your kids want you to know that you are okay, that you are happy, and that they
Mm-hmm.
are safe with you. It's
Yeah.
pretty simple, right? And I
Yeah.
think that microdosing can immediately turn all, thoughts of fear
Mm-hmm.
around, and you are not just telling yourself those things, you are feeling that. And the only
Yeah.
other legal drug. Or actually, it's not legal, so I shouldn't say that. But the not everywhere, but cannabis does that for me too. But
Okay.
what happens with cannabis is it can go into I can start to really think grandly and like
Okay.
just everything is more than okay. Everything is
Okay.
insanely great, and that is maybe a little bit out of reality of, how I need to take care of stuff. And so I appreciate microdosing because it's definitely, it roots me in what is real. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and I think this is great because we've talked about, and this has been something that's been on my mind recently, is um and I was coaching a client yesterday and we were talking about this, is we can often end up moving away from painful states and being focused on it. I'm trying to get away from this state that's less than favorable, anxious, depressed. And what I'm hearing you say as well is, yes, absolutely, we can do that, but we can also say, actually, I'd like to feel better. I'd like to feel more optimistic. I'd like to feel um, more calm. And it sounds like you're very much in your own body and in your energy, which, of course, when we're in that space, it 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 goes out. The
yeah.
kids pick it up. You have a nicer time with the kids because you're feeling better. So they, like you said, they feel safe, and we're always more engaged, and we're communicating better when we're kind of rooted into our bodies. So I'm hearing for people who are listening and are thinking, well, I'm not anxious or depressed. Why would I microdose? Well, actually, it can give you an even better experience of being, is what I'm hearing you say with that.
Yeah, and we call that optimization.
Mm-hmm.
I microdosing can induce more increased creativity, connection with ourself and others. And I like
Mm-hmm.
to say this can do attitude, right? Like I can do it like you
Yeah,
did. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's a shame we can't put psilocybin in the water supply for everybody, but never mind. Um,
I would love to see that. I would love to be around for that day.
never mind fluoride. Let's have some psilocybin.
Yeah.
April, for like I said, for people listening, and we talked about microdosing. You've touched on dosages,
Mm-hmm.
but there are quite a few protocols out there. So I know because I'm been initiated into the quite patriarchal plant
Mm-hmm.
medicine things. I use the Fadiman protocol, which is 1 day on, 2 days off, if I'm correct. But I'm sure there are quite a few other protocols. I don't know if you have any specific ones you recommend. So I'd love to hear how best to microdose for good results that people can
Yeah.
can learn from you.
Yeah. I think there are between 6 and 8 different protocols.
Mm-hmm.
And I partnered with a licensed therapist. I'm not a medical professional. I just, I am a harm reduction expert, right? I help people figure out how to use, the increasing number of legal ways to quote, get high in a way that's safe and with intention, right? That's not how I came to this. I did not 10 years ago. I was not the person that was intentionally using a thing, but um, I now appreciate the power of all of these substances to impact our lives in good and bad ways. So,
Yeah.
harm reduction is everything. I learned that working in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
leading up to adult use legalization there for cannabis. And this idea of harm reduction is, listen, people are going to do it. It's the opposite of abstinence. Don't do it. And this is, hey, you're probably going to do it because the
Yeah.
numbers suggest that most people are. And this is how you can do it not only safely, but you can
Mm-hmm.
get what you're looking for out of it,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know? So, so I partnered with a licensed therapist who has worked to do intake and integration around psilocybin and also ketamine, which is legal here in the US for
Yeah.
therapeutic purposes.
Yeah.
And so there are 2 different protocols, and one is called the Stamets stack, and that
Mm-hmm.
is you microdose for 4 days in a row. And
Mm-hmm.
again, the dose is between a 0.05 and zero point 0.3. People will argue with me on that, but honestly, like 89% of people will say, yes, that's the range.
Yeah.
And you can develop a tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And so So his is 4 days on, 3 days off, and you do that for 4 weeks.
Okay.
The Fadiman protocol, which you mentioned, is what Kendra has advised with our microsite program, which is a do-it-yourself 12-week microdosing protocol. So that is, you take your microdose on a Monday, you take 2 days off, and on the third day, you microdose again. And you keep that schedule up for 4 weeks. You take 2 weeks off entirely, and then you do 4 weeks again, and then you take the last 2 weeks off. So the reason that we advise 12 weeks is because in indigenous cultures, they tell women that they need to interact with the medicine for 3 of their cycles to understand how it's working throughout the month and to be able to dose personalize that. We want people to personalize their protocol. It's very much the male thinking to be like, these are the rules, do it this way. And not even think about the fact that, yeah, it's different for women because our hormones are very much a part of this dance we are doing with these medicines, all of them, including alcohol, right? Which is not a medicine, but is a substance that people take in. So where our estrogen is really impacts our tolerance. And if you take mushrooms, if you're taking it every single day for 3 months, you will build up a tolerance and you will need more medicine. And the point of microdosing is to remind you that you are your own agent. You have your own agency, that you make the decisions. And we want you to learn how to do that. Well, I shouldn't say we, but medicine would like for you to learn how to do that and then put that into practice. And that's called integration. That's when you take the things that you're learning throughout those weeks and then moving into your real life, moving into life and trying to use all that you've learned to get what you're looking for, right? And again, we talk about optimization. Not everyone, is suffering from depression and looking for an intervention that will work for them with fewer side effects, right? That is one reason people turn to psilocybin microdosing. Some people want increased focus at work. They want to be able to connect more with people, especially after the pandemic, where we were all like on an island. And how do I step back into this? I mean, listen, I know it's a few years later, but this is where people still are. And then the biggest reason people are coming to microdosing is because they feel stuck. So like, I know I need to make a decision, but I don't know how to do it. I know I need to make a decision, but I'm not quite sure what that decision is. Microdosing can help you start to see things differently. So you can start to realize like, oh, that's no longer working for me. Oh, that person maybe is not on my side, or that person is on my side and I'm not leaning into that enough, like whatever it might be. But you take 3 months, journal, right? Like take note of what is coming up for you and just don't judge it. Be really curious. You're not doing anything right or wrong. When people tell me that they're not microdosing correctly, the rules are if you don't feel it, that's correct. If you take a day off because you need a rest day, a lot of people have their most insightful moments, their epiphanies on the days that they're not taking the medicine. And take those macro rests too, right? Like you perhaps don't need it all year long, right? And just take the time to integrate while you're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I found so valuable is spending the time to journal and to just, I mean, as you've probably noticed, I'm quite self-introspective. And I think my psychedelic journey has been this deep dive into getting to know myself more. And
Yeah.
what I liked about your podcast is when you were talking about the different strains of mushrooms and the different potencies, and you shared an encounter where you'd hunkered down with some pals to go on a journey and the mushrooms didn't work. I mean, it must have been
No.
so disappointing. But I
Mm.
think it's okay for it to be fun and for you to be seeking kind of lightness in life. I think it was just interesting with our interactions. I've noticed I've kind of been taking it very seriously, and I think I can probably up a little bit with it. But it's making note of what comes up. I think it's noticing when you behave differently, when something that would ordinarily triggers you doesn't. And it's often looking back on it, you might not notice immediately, and then you'll realize, oh, normally when that coworker came in and said that, I'd be seething with rage, and well, I'm not. And that's progress. And I think it's
Yeah.
not wanting to put it into terms of achievement, but I think you'll see how you evolve as a human when you're kind of making notes and
Yeah.
just being, like you said, being with what comes up and allowing it to come up.
Right.
Super, super powerful.
Yeah. Allowing it again without judgment. Yeah. Just
Without judgment.
curiosity. Why am I like this? You can ask yourself that, right? You're not judging yourself. You're just like, oh, why am I doing this?
Why do
Yeah.
I do this? Yes, but without judgment, folks. Okay, without judgment.
Yeah.
My last question, April, for you is, who is microdosing not suitable for? Or who is it not for? Who shouldn't do it?
Whether it's microdosing, whether it's cannabis, whether it's any psychedelic, if you or anyone in your family have a history of psychosis, bipolar, schizophrenia, you can exacerbate if it's an underlying condition. You just can't go near it. You can't. And you need to talk to a medical doctor no matter what. If you're on an SSRI, it will suppress the efficacy of mushrooms because, again, psilocybin is a serotonin agonist.
Yeah.
So it'll just dull the effects. But you shouldn't just like stop taking your SSRI because you decide to microdose or you're going to have a macrodose journey. You really need to work with a medical expert on that titration and understanding. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And a real
Okay.
thing
Thanks.
is there's something called serotonin syndrome, which is when you can overload your system with serotonin. So if you're taking your SSRI and then you're taking mushrooms, you just have to be aware. This is chemistry. This is brain chemistry. Get it right. Please get it right. Yeah. And I guess I should say, take it seriously. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's getting the right advice. It's getting, like you said, speak to a doctor. I think depending on where you are, there are now, like you've been working with a licensed therapist, with a licensed clinician, with what you've been putting together, which is what's on your website, which I'm going to ask you to share just now. So I think it's seek out the experts who can advise you if you aren't sure, because like I said, they are drugs of a form.
Yeah.
They do affect your brain chemistry, and we do have to not. It's not like taking a paracetamol.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. For
April,
sure. Yes.
can you share with us, where folks listening who I'm sure will have been very intrigued by this conversation, of how they can find out more about your podcast, your work, and the goodies that are on your website? Because you have some downloads and some psychedelic cards, which sound quite fun. Just share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, so SetSet is the name of my company, and it's named after set and setting, which is getting your mindset straight and making sure your physical surrounding. And when we microdose, our setting is our daily life. What is our input? Are we watching too much TV? Are we not getting the sleep that we need? What's our diet like? Like you need to, maybe make some changes while you're microdosing because it will just make the whole experience more, quote, successful. That's not a word I'm supposed to use, but you get it. So what I noticed was, integration is this very serious word, and it can be very expensive to work with one-on-one with a coach for microdosing for after you have a macrodose journey. So some friends and I got together and created these cards. And there's not the word psychedelic or psilocybin on them. You can play them with your children. You really can. And they're great. And they're intended to help you connect with your inner child. I'm the firstborn girl of 4, and I maybe need some help with that. So selfishly, I love these cards. They're so fun. And the other thing I noticed that was missing was evidence-based clinician backed information. We can all go online and become an expert at anything. We can read a Reddit thread and be like, okay, I got this. It is, again, brain chemistry. And when you're going into that experience, knowing that you got the information that you needed from a reliable, informed clinician, just like makes you feel more confident, which is going to contribute to, the best outcome that you could imagine, because your experience will be more peaceful. So yeah, we have the ultimate psilocybin guide that you can download. All of these are available in PDF and audio. So I narrate the guides. You can listen to them. That's available as part of the PDF download. The comprehensive ketamine guide, the 12-week microdosing protocol, the DIY that I mentioned, that has reflection questions and all the integration help that you would need, included in that. And then, our universal integration program, which is, it's medicine agnostic, it's dose agnostic. So once you own it, it's your integration guide that you can always turn to, with reflection questions and guided meditations and guided practices. And Kendra studied the neurobiology of change, and that's what it's rooted in. It is explaining to you what is happening now that you've introduced psychedelics into your brain and into existence in your life, right? Like, what have you done? And I will tell you, I was about to start working on this website in about April 1st of this year. And it's been a long journey, and there were a lot of emotions around a lot of things, and uncertainty and money being spent. And so around that time, I had to re-listen to all the audio that Kendra had recorded. And I sent her a message. I was like, this is going to help so many people. I feel so much better just knowing that, one, these medicines are on my side. And two, there's just so many simple things that I continue to do that I don't need to worry about. So thank you, to her, I'm saying, thank you for sharing everything you've learned in such a concise way, so that we can just move forward, and just relax a little bit about our role in everything, because that's the default mode network ego talking, it's not always about us. Shockingly. Yeah. So those are the types of products that we have. Yeah. And to find our, the website, all of our podcasts, we have like almost 150 podcasts. I go to our YouTube channel, and it's YouTube at Get SetSet. So the website is GETSETSET.com, Get SetSet, and our YouTube is also Get SetSet.
Magic. I am going to put those links in the show notes so people can go and find them. And like
Appreciate
I say, I enjoyed the very educational aspect of your podcast, but also the fun aspect of it as well. It was just really interesting hearing about the different strains of mushroom. And I did have a chuckle when you were saying that golden teachers, which is the ones I've been using, are the Fisher Price of mushrooms.
Yeah, Fisher Price, my first mushroom. You just can't go wrong with golden teachers at all. Yeah.
So some of the other ones do sound like that would be a very interesting ride. So
yeah, and you know what? I was not, when I first started researching strains, they say a cube is a cube. So when the most common species of psychedelic mushrooms is Psilocybe cubensis. And so a cube is a cube, like it doesn't really matter, except for penis envy, which is 3 to 4 times more potent. That phrase just isn't true. It doesn't, it's not true. People are having different experiences depending on the strain that they choose. And guess what? Just like with cannabis, all these breeders are now getting after this and coming up with different strains. And so there's a lot more choice. And just stick with golden teachers is what I would recommend to get started.
Absolutely, play it sort of safe, but I think we're downplaying when we're saying Fisher Price mushrooms. You will it will still give you a rip roarer if it chooses to.
to say
Anyway,
the least. Yeah.
on that note of having a rip roarer, this has
Yeah.
been wonderful, April. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody listening has as well. Loads of great information. And yeah, go and check out April's website and the PDFs and the psychedelic cards.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today, folks. I will see you same time next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please leave me a 5-star rating and a review, and make sure you share this episode with a friend who you know will also enjoy it. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. Please drop me a DM and say hi at Emma O'Brien Coach. And for more information about coaching with me, please head to my website, which is emmaobrien.coach.com.